Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. In this video, I'm going to take a look at how the press uses incomplete or misleading information to confuse the public about climate. Here's a story from 1 week ago. Record-setting wildfire in New Mexico declared contained. Albuquerque, New Mexico. More than 4 grueling months and $300 million later, the federal government has declared the largest wildfire in New Mexico history to be contained. Now let's take a look at the information which the Associated Press is not reporting on. What they're not telling people is that the fire they're referring to, the Hermit's Peak fire, was started by the United States Forest Service. According to the U.S. government, it was supposed to be a controlled burn, but it got out of control and became very large. I took a particular interest in this fire because 40 years ago I worked as a wilderness ranger in that same district. Another thing they're not telling people is that the fire was actually contained more than 2 months ago. New Mexico has had one of the wettest monsoon seasons on record, with the burn area receiving about 14 inches of rain since the middle of June. It's also been very cool with high humidity, so there really hasn't been much fire activity for several months. But the locals know they can get more money out of the government if they keep the fire going in the public's mind. It's a long-standing tradition in northern New Mexico for the locals to start forest fires so that the Forest Service will hire them to put the fire out. In John Nichols' book, The Milagro Beanfield War, he talks about this. Northern New Mexico is one of the poorest parts of the country, and fighting fires is good employment for many people there. And really big fires, which they say they're fighting for months, is even better employment. Now let's take a look at what's actually going on with U.S. forest fires this summer. August burn acreage in the United States this year was the lowest on record, down almost 90% from 10 years ago. The southwestern United States has received huge amounts of rain this summer, and it's pretty difficult for a fire to start when everything is that wet. For the entire year so far, burn acreage in the United States has been well below average and down more than 80% from 90 years ago. This document was on the National Interagency Fire Center website for decades, but was recently deleted by the Biden administration. It reads, in the conterminous United States during the pre-industrial period from 1500 to 1800, an average of 145 million acres burned every year. Today, only 14 million acres burn annually. So burn acreage in the United States so far this year is actually down 95% from the pre-industrial average, when carbon dioxide levels are very low. Reality doesn't coincide with Biden administration propaganda, so the administration deleted the document. Now let's go back in time to a really bad fire year, 1898. During September 1898, every state recorded temperatures over 90 degrees, and 17 states recorded temperatures over 100 degrees. On this date in 1898, September 4th, 50 people died from the heat in New York City. Record of heat and storm. The storm record for the summer of 1898 will be one long to be remembered. Oregon set their all-time temperature record of 119 degrees during the summer of 1898. And they didn't do it just once, they actually hit 119 degrees twice that summer. That record's never been broken, even during what the press declared to be the worst heat wave ever last summer. California was having a massive drought, and ranchers were having to move their cattle out of state. In January of 1898, a tornado hit Fort Smith, Arkansas, and killed 50 people. A devastating typhoon struck the Philippines, destroying the city of Tacloban and killing 7,000 people. Tasmania had some of their worst bushfires on record. During February 1898, the Tasmanian fires were raging all over the island. New Zealand was also having huge forest fires during February 1898. Queensland was flooding while southern Australia was on fire. Victoria was having massive forest fires around Valentine's Day 1898. It's not surprising that Australia and New Zealand would be having fires during February because it's their summer. But the really incredible fire that occurred that February occurred in South Carolina. One of the largest forest fires in U.S. history burned 3 million acres of the Carolinas in just over 24 hours, and this was during the winter. Hundreds of miles of timberlands were swept by fire in just over 24 hours. France was having huge forest fires as well. Northern California was having huge forest fires during April 1898, which is much earlier than their normal fire season. Wisconsin was devastated by fire during October 1898. The forest fires in Northern California were already going in April, and they were still going during August. There were also huge forest fires in Southern California during April 1898. During July 1898, there were massive forest fires in northwestern Colorado. At the same time, disastrous forest fires were occurring in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. Fires were burning in Colorado during July, and by October the fires covered about 1/4 of the state. The Fort Collins newspaper reported on October 6, 1898, that forest fires were burning in all parts of Colorado. On October 2, 1898, the Leadville, Colorado newspaper detailed the fires which were burning all over the western half of the state. On September 30, 1898, the New York Times reported forest fires in Colorado. People in northwest part of the state said to be fleeing for their lives. Loss will be enormous. The fires were reported to cover most of the northwest part of the state. And the Colorado forest fires were still raging into November. The United States was having huge forest fires during February 1898, and they were still going all the way into November. November 9, 1898, huge forest fires burning in Oklahoma. And during October, they were having massive forest fires in Wisconsin as well. Historical burn acreage in the United States was much larger than what we experience now, but very few people know about this because the press is constantly misinforming them. The press also claims that the fire season has gotten longer, when in fact it appears that the exact opposite is true. Now let's look at the other half of the fake news. Fire is responsible for 1/4 of U.S. forest loss since 2021. Forest fires don't cause forest loss. What they do is regenerate the forest. Let's take a look at this webpage, the best autumn hiking trails in the United States. Included in that webpage is Santa Fe, New Mexico, with Santa Fe spelled wrong. This photograph was taken to the west of the Hermit's Peak fire, which we were talking about earlier in this video. They have the tallest aspen trees in the world up where I used to work as a wilderness ranger. And the reason those aspen trees are there is because there was a massive forest fire during June of 1890, which burned up the western slopes of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The fire cleared out an overgrown forest, which made room for all of these aspen trees to grow, and now it's a major tourist attraction. Fire didn't destroy the forest, it made it better. During October 2020, there were massive forest fires in the Medicine Bow National Forest here in southeastern Wyoming. I took this picture in July of 2021, and you can see how the forest was very rapidly regenerating with lots of new flowers. Let's look at another example of forest regeneration. I took this photograph last October to the west of my hometown, Los Alamos, New Mexico. There was a huge fire there in 2011, and now the burn area is filling in with beautiful aspen trees. Forest fires don't destroy the forest, quite the opposite. Many forests can't survive without regular large fires. Now let's look at the real reason we've had some large fires in recent years. I regularly hike on this trail through the Medicine Bow National Forest west of Cheyenne, Wyoming. A century of fire suppression has left the forest a complete mess. There's huge amounts of fuel on the ground as a result of man-made suppression of forest fires. So when a fire does come, it's going to be very large. And when it does happen, you can be certain the press will try to blame it on climate change. It's all fake and misleading news from the press all the time. Toto's been pulling back the curtain on this scam for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie Caesar, Toki, and Upala on the web at realclimatescience.com.